My name is Paul Reedy. I'm a head assistant or associate head coach at Grandview. I've been there since 2011, so I've been there for 15 years. We've won 13 national championships, had 9 in a row, and then a streak of 4 in a row currently. So I'm going to talk today about what it means to be an lead assistant. I've been around it for a long time, and if you look at the slideshow I have here, you notice a bunch of different pictures. And I think there's, looking at all the pictures that are reflected on this and my coaching journey and all the assistant coaches I have had, I don't think there's anything that, makes one coach better than the other, and so I think, there's tons of different assistant coaches I've been around. They're all awesome. And so I don't think there's one specific trait or skill it takes to be a lead assistant. The top left there is a guy by the name of Bob Rolfler. He was my assistant coach in high school. He was the head coach at Emmitsburg, where I was from, as a high schooler. He had a stroke actually in the 80s, and then I graduated high school in 2002, so he was the assistant coach, during my high school run there. And you look at him and you're like, okay, what's this guy have to do and why is he so elite? Well, the one crazy thing about Bob, he had a stroke in the 80s. Half of his body was paralyzed. The whole left side of his body was paralyzed. So you'd be like, how is he gonna teach me moves and all this stuff? It didn't matter. He was by far and away one of the best assistant coaches. Maybe he didn't get out on the mat and teach a whole lot of technique. He'd still show you some moves and stuff with his one good arm, but he led by example. We'd go in the weight room as a team after practice. This guy would, it was old school curl bench. Bob Rolfer would sit there for like 20 minutes with like a 40-pound dumbbell. He was like 60 years old and just crushed curls the entire time, and so he was a great example, and maybe he couldn't show you high crotch and whatnot, but he cared about every guy in the team, from the best guy in the team to the worst guy in the team. And like I said, he led by example, regardless of his circumstances. And then the other picture there is I was a high school assistant coach for 1 year before I came to Grandview. The guy on the left is a guy by the name of J.P. Holgan, and I don't think he even qualified for the state tournament, but he was the assistant. It was me and him and Steve Hamilton at Perry High School. But this guy, he was awesome. He was the most genuine person I've ever met. He was invested in the community, knew every kid, knew what every kid needed, and so it was awesome to learn from him. And then the bottom picture, my time at Wartburg College. So I was at Wartburg. Obviously you got Jim Miller there. He was the head coach during that time, but if you look at the picture, you got Chris Ortner. He was the head assistant later on in his time. He's a high school coach now. He's won, I think, 6 state titles at Don Bosco. Eric Keller, he was one of the assistants during my time in college. Obviously, he's the head coach at Wartburg now. He's got 6 titles. Nick Mitchell's in that picture. He's won 13 titles at Grandview. Will Kelly's in that picture. A guy by the name of Dave Malachek was one of my assistants. He's the head coach at lacrosse now. Dave's brought home numerous trophies and is a great coach. And there's other guys throughout the years, but I think it's kind of unique. You'd be like, well, all these guys, but all of them really brought different things to the table, And so it was like Coach Malachek, he was super organized. Keller was technical. Coach Mitchell, he was a younger guy back then, and so maybe Coach Mitchell was the guy that you went to if you had problems, And Ortner, he was similar, And so I think as you look at what it means to be a lead assistant coach, there's no cookie cutter thing. It's being there for the guys, caring for them, and all these guys were elite assistant coaches. A little bit about how I got into coaching. I wasn't a great wrestler myself. I never made the lineup at Wartburg. I never won a state title or anything like that. But I always loved the sport of wrestling. And I was fortunate to have some great head coaches, and Bob Kenny down there on the left. He was my high school head coach. He won 6 state titles at Emmitsburg High School. And then Jim Miller on the right. And Jim won 10 national titles at Wartburg. And I just kind of saw the impact these guys had on the lives of kids. And I was like, when I went to college initially, I was like, I just want to be a high school coach, because I saw the impact that Bob Kenny had on guys. And then when I went to Wartburg, I saw the impact that Coach Miller had on guys. And I was like, this is something I want to do. I want to impact other kids' lives, And some things that stood out from Bob Kenny. He held everybody to the highest standard. He was a hard ass, And so it was something that was very impactful on me. And then when I went to Wartburg College, you had Coach Miller. He was obviously a phenomenal coach with his winning and stuff like that. But I think, he impacted guys in other ways than on the wrestling mat. He had a 100% graduation rate in his time there, which is pretty unbelievable for the sport of college wrestling. And yeah, the guy's won a lot of championships and stuff like that, but he had this unique ability to make everybody feel like they were the best. You know, every time you'd see him, he'd be like, "You're the man, you're the man, you're the man." I still call Coach Miller all the time. That's the first thing he always tells me, "You're the man." You know, and so he has a way of lifting people up. And as I was kind of reflecting on this deal, one thing that I thought was kind of cool was like, you know, my relationship with Coach Miller. I wasn't the best guy ever, but he always cared about me, you know, and it was kind of funny as the end of my senior year, it's probably like 2 weeks before nationals. I wasn't going. I was backup and I was doing something and he walked by and he saw me doing it wrong and he like stops and he spends 10 minutes, you know, helping me do it right. And I'm like, why does this guy even care? You know, my career's basically over, but that's just the kind of guy that Coach Miller is, you know, and the relationship he has with us too, where he's still, you know, he's still impacting me today. You know, last night we were hanging out, and so that's kind of, as a coach, you know, I want to have that relationship on guys where, you know what, long time down the road, he still cares about me, and he's still a very influential person in my life. So I get asked all the time, you know, I've been an assistant for a long time, and a lot of people will be like, when are you going to be a head coach, Reedy? When are you going to be a head coach? Or don't you want to be a head coach? You know, and I guess for me, you know, it kind of comes back down to my why. You know, what's your why? And for me, it's not very complicated. You know, why do I want to coach? Well, the number one thing is I want to impact the lives of student athletes. I love the relationships, and I love the sport of wrestling. And I guess for me, you don't have to be a head coach to have an impact on the athletes, have a positive relationship, or love the sport of wrestling. And so I guess for me, you know, when it comes to like not moving on and staying in my current position, it's, you know, I love what I'm doing, and I'm having the impact that I'd always desired to have on kids. Got a next slide here is keys to being a young assistant coach. And, you know, I think it's, sometimes as a young assistant coach, you know, a lot of times in the sport, you got to start out and you're like, you know, just trying to make ends meet for a while. And so some keys, you know, to be a young assistant coach and getting that first full-time coaching job. Number one, do the dirty work. You know, clean the mats, clean the locker room, help guys cut weight, be the guy that drives the van, take the backups to the tournaments. You know, if it's something not everybody else wants to do, be the guy that jumps in, you know. And I think that's kind of, you know, where I got my first job with Coach Mitchell is, you know, we'd work together. I was a part-time assistant coach for 3 years at Wartburg College after I was done competing. And he knew that I was going to do all those things. You know, he knew that whatever it took, I'd get it done, you know. And so as an assistant coach, that's kind of like your interview period, you know. And so when Coach Mitchell got a full-time assistant position, I was supposed to be going to a different high school at that time, keep coaching high school as a plan. And he called me up, you know, and my interview process was basically the 3 years I had leading into that. And he'd seen the kind of work I was going to do, and he knew exactly what I was getting. You know, there wasn't any questions of interview, really. It was, hey, I know who you are, come take this job, man. And I was all in. Say yes to every opportunity, you know. And I think this is something that's real important, you know. There's a movie Jim Carrey's in, it's called The Yes Man. And you know, his life like drastically changes when he starts saying yes to everything. And I think, you know, being a young assistant coach, it's like, hey, you want to go to this recruiting thing? Yep. You want to run an extra practice? You want to go down here and meet with this kid? You want to go over there and recruit? You want to do all these different things? You want to run a club practice? You want to do anything for free? You know, it's just always yes, you know. Another thing, first in, last to leave. Before I had kids, this was always something I tried to do every day. I knew when time Mitchell got there, I'd always try to beat him to the office every day, and I would try to not leave until after him. Ask questions. I think it's important, you know, learn from everyone. Obviously, you want to learn from the head coach. You want to learn from the other assistant coaches on your staff, read books, watch technique. I still remember Coach Miller, he was my college coach, and he asked me to go on this, he used to teach at Wartburg a class called Outdoor Recreation. And every year he'd go down to Arkansas for like 3 days canoeing, and he hit me up and he's like, hey, I need somebody to go along and be a chaperone, you know, somebody to sit in a canoe with him basically and paddle for 3 days. And I was like, absolutely. And I just drilled him with questions for, you know, the entirety of the trip. You know, it was a 12-hour drive down there and a 12-hour drive back, and sat in a tent with him, and I just asked him questions, you know, the whole time. And it was, you know, I'm sure he knew what I was doing, but you know, it's a great opportunity to learn, you know. This picture also, besides I look super young in it, the guy on the left with me is Omi Acosta. He's actually the head coach at Life University now. And he was a Grandview guy. And he stuck around for 3 years as a part-time assistant, just doing whatever it took because he wanted to coach wrestling. And he'd always ask me, like, Reedy, what do I gotta do to be a full-time guy? What do I gotta do to be a full-time guy? And I always be like, just do the dirty work, man. Now he ended up getting a break, after 3 years at Grandview. He did 1 year at the Coast Guard Academy too. And then he got the life job and he's totally crushing it over there, and I'm really proud of him. But, I think it's one of those things like when the life people called us and they're like, what do you think of Omi Acosta? It's like, this guy's a workhorse, he's gonna crush it, And so I think, being willing to do that work, not feeling like any job is above you or beyond you, just not being entitled by anything. Rule number 1, it's not about you. And the reason I have this slide in here, this picture, is I had Coach Miller in the picture with me and Coach Mitchell. And that was Coach Miller's rule number 1 about coaching, okay? It's not about you. And I think that's really hard, when you come from being a student athlete, Because a student athlete, it's always like, how do I feel today? How did I wrestle today? How did I perform? And all these kind of things. And so it's 100% about you. And then you get into coaching and absolutely none of it is about you, And I wrote in here, no credit. If you're in wrestling for the credit or the money, you should get a new job. It's actually the truth, because I don't care, obviously I'm NAI level and there's, no matter what level you're at, even the highest level, there's not that much credit in it, and nobody's getting super rich, other than a handful of guys. And so if you're in it for those things, you're in it for the wrong reasons. And I think sometimes as an assistant coach, people, think about their legacy and things like that. And, I'm kind of a wrestling nerd a little bit. And so I've watched, a lot of guys come and go, and, if you look at the history of some of the sports legends, you look at the NAI level, I just think of guys that have recently retired. Mike Mockholtz, he was the head coach at Missouri Valley. He left and he was AD for like 10 minutes and then they fired him, He has there's nothing around their campus. You'd be like, that guy won 3 national titles, they're gonna name the gym after him. No, he doesn't have anything, at his school anymore, or other guys in there, you look at the Division I level, growing up, I was from Iowa, so Bobby Douglas, he was, a legend in Iowa. They don't have a gym named after him. There's no statue named after him. Jay Robinson, John Smith, he just left at Oklahoma State, did a fantastic job down there, but it's not like they renamed the arena after him. There's nothing there. Mike Denny, head coach at Nebraska Omaha, obviously phenomenal coach, won 7 national titles. On the evening he won his 7th national title, he was fired, or not fired, they dropped their program, Jim Miller at Wartburg, it's not like when I was an athlete, I was like, oh, they'll rename the gym after this guy. He's won 10 national titles. It's not like that, and so I think it's important as a coach, when you think about your legacy and things like that, man, for me personally, I put my legacy, in my faith, in Jesus, in my family and the relationships with them, and then the relationships with the guys I've been fortunate enough to coach. This one's pretty simple. Check your pronouns, okay? Oftentimes you hear guys, and they're talking, or other assistant coaches or coaches, and they're like, yeah, I recruited him, he's my guy, I taught him this, I taught him that, I'm the guy he works with, and they're just trying to take all the credit. And number 1, the head coach doesn't want to hear you talking like that. Number 2, hopefully you have a bunch of other assistant coaches, and if I'm sitting here talking like, man, I taught Scotty this and I taught Scotty that, and I did all this for Scotty, nobody wants to hear that. The head coach doesn't want to hear it. The other assistant coaches you work with, they don't want to hear it, So for us at Grandview, we always have an our mentality, He's our guy, right? Our guy. It's kind of funny when you look at the pronouns or whatever, you never hear anybody talking about their 25-pounder that just got pinned, like, oh, he's my guy, I taught him that, and so the credit really belongs to the student athletes, and so I think that's something to keep in mind, and check your pronouns. Loyalty is key. This is pretty self-explanatory too. Don't be a yes man, but if you ever do disagree, which happens, you need to fall in line, and sometimes that's not easy to do, but that's just part of the job, is if you and the head coach, talk about something and it doesn't go your way, you just got to move on. Sometimes I've worked with other people in the past where it really bugs them if they don't get their way on something like that. And so I think it's really important that, don't be the yes man. You see coaches like that too, where whatever the head coach says, they just agree with it. Don't be that guy. But also at the same time, if you give him your opinion and he doesn't agree, that's fine. Just move on, keep moving forward. And You want to be united in front of the team and the public, you know. I think me and Mitchell have had our fair share of disagreements over the years, but I bet you there's never a guy on the team that was like, oh, these guys don't get along or anything like that. And so I think it's important that, you know, you're always united to, you know, your family, the public, everybody in the world. They think that you guys have, you know, are always thinking the same thing, and everything stays behind closed doors. Run through the wall. You know, we all want the student athlete that'll run through the wall for us, but are you willing to run through the wall for your student athlete? You know, it's kind of a key here. You know, and I think when you think of running through the wall for the kids, yeah, it can be on the wrestling mat, but really it's like, where can you serve these guys? You know, and at my school, you know, it's not like we have a person to do every job in the world, and so, you know, you might be their counselor a little bit. You might be helping them with academics. You might be helping them with organization. Maybe they have personal problems or, you know, real loss, you know, real life problems. You know, their girlfriend dumps them. You know, are you there to help them? Are you there to help them take on their problems? You know, at Grandview, we always talk about, you know, family, okay? And I always think this is funny because family is like a buzzword now in coaching. You know, at the NCAA basketball tournament a couple years ago, Nike hands out like the same warm-up top for all the teams. So the, whatever they call it, the Final Four, whatever, every team came out and it said, whatever, Duke basketball family and North Carolina basketball family. And so family is just a huge buzzword in college athletics today. And for us, I mean, when we talk about family, we're not talking about going on a fishing trip. We're not talking about we go play paintball together, have a barbecue. For us, family is you're there when somebody needs you. You know, so I think that's really important. You know, when it comes to building relationships, I think it's really important to be able to build relationships with the guys that aren't like you. You know, at Grandview we have a large team, we have a diverse team, and so it's like you need to be able to relate to every kid. You know, I'm a small town guy from small town Iowa. We have guys from all over the country, you know, so it's important to be able to build relationships with guys no matter where they're from, you know. And Lou Holtz, he wrote a book a few years back, probably a long time ago actually now, but he's older now. But he's in the book. He said nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I read that book a long time ago, but that quote still stands me today. And so it's always like making sure that your athletes know that, dude, this isn't just about wrestling, man. You care about them, and if you care about them, they will run through the wall for you. Compliment the head coach. Okay. I got bad cop written down here, and I think that's kind of a funny one because sometimes you'll see it and whatever, your kid goes out there and he loses a tough match, and Coach Mitchell will go over there and he'll let the guy know that he's disappointed in him, right? And the worst thing you can do as an assistant coach, after the head coach walks over and he tells him, hey, not very pleased with you, is to walk over and double down on it, you know. And so I think when you're talking about complimenting the head coach, don't ever do the bad cop. If the 25-pounder gets pinned and the head coach goes over there and tells him he's displeased, your job isn't to go down there and double down and make him feel worse on it. It's to go over there, put your hand around his back, pat him on the back, and just tell him, hey, it's gonna be all right, we're gonna get better, go from here, you know, have a plan. And so I think one thing is don't be the bad cop. Coach where you're at. This is a funny one. So me and Coach Mitchell, we were at Wartburg together he was there as an assistant coach for 8 years, and I was there as an assistant for 3. Obviously Wartburg, tremendously successful. And so since we kind of came from the same place, he'd started at Grandview 2 years before I got there. So I was his first full-time assistant coach. Well, when I got there, man, I still loved Wartburg, and I still do, but we'd talk about them a lot. We'd be like, oh man, at Wartburg they had this guy named Joe Nighthawk, or Joe Breitbach. He ran a bar in town called the Nighthawk. And this guy, he was awesome. He'd run their golf outing, he'd run their tournament, he'd take care of the nationals, hotels, he'd take care of the party after nationals. And me and Mitchell would sit in his office and we'd be like, man, if we had Joe Breitbach, man, how much better would our lives be? Well, we don't have Joe Breitbach. We still don't have Joe Breitbach to do all the crappy work for us. But it's something, you know, I think sometimes you come from one place and you're like, oh, if we had this one thing that we had at this other place, you know, and for us at Wartburg, they had Joe Breitbach, and this guy was a freaking workhorse. We didn't have him, and so after about a year of being like, hey, I wish we had this guy to run our golf outing and do all this stuff for us, we quit talking about Joe. We haven't talked about him in 14 years. And we've done a lot better job, moving on. Now we just do all that stuff ourselves, and we're still looking for a Joe Brightbox. So if you see this and you're looking to move to Des Moines, Iowa and work for free, we'd love to have you. Be a role player. In other sports, role player is a real thing. In the sport of wrestling, it's not. We talked about it earlier. It's selfish. It's all about you. All these things. In coaching, you got to be a role player, right? And at Grandview, we're lucky we have 10 other assistant coaches, and everybody kind of has their role. In other sports, in basketball, they have the six-man, the guy that comes off the bench, or the guy that he sits in the corner and waits and shoots threes, right? Well, in a wrestling coaching staff, it's not all about like, I'm going to corner the best guy and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's where can you serve the guys? Where can you serve the team? What is your role? Be all in. At Grandview, we talk about championship lifestyle, and that's our mentality. That's our motto. That's everything to us. And I firmly believe that if you believe in the championship lifestyle, it'll make you the best wrestler you can possibly be. I'm all in on it. Maybe when it first started, we first started talking about it, I was like, whatever. But the more we talk about it, the more I believe in it. And so whatever your institution's motto is, if it's, I know like other institutions like Coast Guard, for example, their thing is always ready. And I know the coaches up there at the Coast Guard, it's Bratland and Foley, and dude, those guys, they're like all in. I think they have like tattooed on themselves, like they're absolutely all in on their motto. And so whatever it is, and as an assistant coach, you probably don't get to choose it, but whatever it is, be all in on whatever it is your motto is at your institution. Be an example, and I think this has a lot of tiers to it. I don't wrestle anymore, and when I wrestled with guys all the time, be an example meant like, do the whole practice, right? Like, don't ever, take a break, all those kind of things. Be tough, do the conditioning with the guys, be the first guy up, and when you're doing drills and all those things. And maybe now for me, because I got a little older and I don't like to wrestle anymore. I'm too old. I get hurt. It's like be an example of how I live. How do you treat people? Your guys are always watching what you're doing. How do you talk about people? Now I have 3 kids of my own. I bring them to practice all the time. And I like to be an example of, what a good dad should look like to these guys. It's funny. Like my kids come around all the time, and a couple months ago, one of our guys is like, he's like, so you're like there for them all the time, because some of these guys you're coaching, they come from broken homes, stuff like that. And so if you can show them what it looks like to be an awesome dad, that's awesome, man. Don't ask, just do. Solve problems before they hit the head coach. And I think this is something that comes across a lot. And sometimes it's like somebody has a weight problem, right? Maybe it's somebody has grades. Maybe it's a guy that's partying too much. Okay, you hear about these things. You don't always have to have the head coach handle these problems. Go handle them yourself, right? Take care of them. You can tell the head coach, hey, by the way, I talked to Scotty the other day about his weight or his partying or this and that. Okay, you can make him aware. But it's kind of nice because it's like a step one in problem solving, right? Because somebody you hear about somebody they're partying too much. As the assistant coach, you can go up to him, talk to him about it, and be like, hey, I'm not gonna tell the head coach, I just wanna keep this between me and you, but dude, I've heard you've been partying too much, you gotta rein it in. And then if it becomes a problem later on down the road, then you can talk to the head coach, have him talk about it, keep him in the loop, make him aware of it, but ideally he doesn't say anything to the guy, he pretends he doesn't know, right? It's confidential between you and the guy at that time, right? So that's a big one. Don't cause the head coach more work. It's pretty simple. Don't be a distraction. Be reliable. Take things off the head coach's plate, right? There's a lot of stuff the head coach doesn't want to do. Just start doing them, Plan the travel, set up the tournaments. I think one thing when it comes to being an assistant coach is everything is your job, right? There's nothing that's not your job. When it comes to academic support, custodial stuff, fundraising, recruiting, there's nothing out there that's not your job, So just dive all in, do every part of the position. Another thing that's key to being a successful coach is continuity without the staff, and I wrote here down who won all the national titles in every position. In the NAI, obviously we won it this year. You got Coach Turner in this picture up here. He's been at Grandview for 18 years as a part-time assistant. You got Jason Clark in there. He's been there for 9 years as a part-time assistant. Obviously I've been there for 15. You got Coach Henderson. He wrestled at Grandview. Now he's been an assistant coach. He's been with us for like 14 years now, between all of it combined, you know. You look at all the divisions combined, okay, Penn State, obviously they're the gold standard in the sport right now. Cody and Cale have worked together for 18 years. Casey has been with those guys, or Cody's been with those guys for 20, and then Casey's been with them for 18. Like Nebraska Kearney, they won the national title this year in Division II. Coach Jensen and Sorensen, they've been together the entirety of their time together at Kearney as far as Jensen's head coaching. Obviously, Wartburg and Johnson Wales, they tied for a championship this year. The guy, I forget his name, the guy at Johnson Wales, he's been the assistant coach there for 28 years. I looked it up the other day. You know, so that continuity is huge. You know, 28 years, and then finally they get it done and win a share of a title this year. Wartburg, they got Kittleson. He's only been there a few years, but that guy's been a head coach before. He's been in wrestling a long time. Nobody recruits better than that guy. Indian Hills, they won a title at the NJCAA level. Coach Foz and Spree, they were together at Ellsworth, and now they've been together at Indian Hills. And so I think one key to being successful is, you know, continuity. If your staff is changing all the time, you know, it's hard to win. It takes everyone, you know, and so I think getting everyone on board is crucial, you know, to having success. You know, the picture down there in the bottom, it's me and Coach Mitchell and a gal by the name Michelle Prongi. She's been at Grandview for 19 years. She's the academic success coordinator. She's basically like another assistant coach. Like she's in charge of our guys' academics, but she's like a secondary mom to these kids. I mean, she helps these guys with everything. She's all in, you know. She was at the national tournament. I don't have him pictured here, but I wrote this guy's name down, David, the custodian. So at Grandview, our wrestling room was off campus, and David, the custodian, he's gotten promoted, and so he's supposed to do other parts of the job, but he's like, I will not give up the wrestling room. It's his thing, you know, and he's 100% all in. He's like, if I don't do a good job and we get a skin infection here or something, oh, I'd feel so terrible. And he's like talking to me about the championship lifestyle. This guy is freaking all in, and so it's like get everybody you can all in, you know. We're lucky, you know, we got some of these guys been around a long time. I mentioned earlier Henderson Turner. We have a team pastor, Pastor Steve. Probably the best thing we've ever done as programs, hire that guy. Well, not hire him because he volunteers, but it's awesome. We have a team nutritionist. We have 2 team chiropractors that were both college wrestlers themselves, Dr. Miller, Dr. Nag, you know, and all these guys, you get more people all in. It's like more cogs in the machine. The more people you have on board, they're 100% all in, you know, the more likely your chances of success are, you know. And the last picture up there is just a picture of Coach Henderson. He's been full-time now at Grandview for 5-6 years, something like that. And so we're lucky that we're one of the few non-Division I schools with 2 full-time assistant coaches. We fundraised for his position. That guy totally raises my level. He works at like a different level, you know, and he's a little younger too, and so he knows a lot of stuff that like I don't know how to do, social media, things like that. So he's mentoring me on how to use a computer and all these things. But you know, have everybody on board and just keep everybody going in the right direction. One thing I think too is kind of, as I was reflecting on some of this stuff, is, you know, we have a big staff and we have all these different people involved, but we like, as a coaching staff and all these people, we like each other. It was funny, David Marigatani, who used to coach at Merrimack Community College. He's friends with Coach Shern. We were like hanging out with him one time at a tournament, and whatever, us coaches, we were like making fun of each other, hanging out, and David is like, you guys actually like each other, huh? Told Turner that, you know, and you see so many staffs where like the guys don't genuinely like each other, you know, and part of the reason I stay at Grandview and is I genuinely like all these guys. They're my friends, you know, and so build positive relationships and be there for each other. Last key to being a good assistant coach, you know, is have a great head coach, all right? And it's kind of funny, you know, and I don't know the guys at Penn State at all. I listen to, like I said, I'm a wrestling nerd. I listen to all their stuff. When you ever hear anybody from Penn State talk, they never really say Cale. They say Cale, Cody, Casey, right? All 3 of them. You know, when you hear Cale talk, he's not talking about himself ever. He's talking about Cale, Cody. He's always Cody, Casey, right? He's always talking about the other guys, you know. And so I think that's a, you know, really huge piece of it, you know, is having a good assistant or a good head coach that's like wanting to, you know, share everything, you know. And playing everything. And I know some stuff at Grandview we do that's beneficial to keeping all the other assistant coaches involved. Every day we plan practice as staff every day. We have a conference room by a wrestling room, so 30 minutes prior to practice, 3:30 every day, we'll get together as a staff. Not all the part-time guys can make it. Some of them do, some of them don't. But we'll divide up practice that day and be like, hey, we went to a tournament on Saturday. We come back on Monday and we're like, what should we do today? And we're all looking at our notes and we're like, well, I've written down we stink at leg defense, and he has written down stink at leg defense. Well, we probably should do that today. And so Coach Mitchell's, will be like, all right, well, why doesn't Turner and Henderson handle the leg defense as a staff today? And then whatever we need to work on sprawls too, Reedy, you take that. And so we kind of divide our practices. I think that's something maybe unique is we're never like, oh, this guy's gonna run practice today, or this guy's gonna run the room. We all do it, right? We all have things that we do, and we all take parts and just kind of divide up our stuff. Other things, Coach Mitchell, he refuses to take any camp money. As assistant coaches, nobody gets paid a ton, and so it's nice if you can supplement your income with some camp money. And Coach Mitchell always refused to take any camp money. And that's nice for me and Coach Henderson to help us survive. Another thing, is he gives us autonomy, and that's nice as a head coach to be like, hey, I'm not gonna check up on you. You guys just do it, do your thing, and so I'm thankful that to work with Nick. So thanks for listening to this today, and hopefully you take some things out of that into your own career to help you be a good assistant coach or someday be a head coach down the road. But I think those are a lot of the different keys that have helped me throughout my career.